Okay. So, hello everyone, and thank you for watching this recording. Thank you for joining our little info session on how to participate in the Give a Forest Story campaign. My name is Sara, and I work here at the Rutu Foundation, and Marijn will also be guiding us through this info session on how to participate. So let me just start by telling you a bit about who we are and why this campaign came about. So at the Rutu Foundation, we work with children worldwide through two programs, which are the Language Friendly School and the Indigenous-led Education Network. And we try to promote education that respects cultural identity, which then in turn, of course, involves language and the ability of children to speak in their mother tongues uh, throughout their education. However, around the world, many children are denied this right, and this leads to them struggling or falling behind when adapting to new environments. For instance, when they are in migration settings, or even losing their cultural heritage when it comes especially to Indigenous children. So when schools prohibit mother tongues, students experience more shame and insecurity, and Indigenous children in particular, lose access to knowledge that is essential for their communities and the environment. And when we speak about this, we are speaking about a loss that affects something that is called biocultural diversity, which is the link between language, culture, and biodiversity, the environment. So when languages, and when I say this, I mean any language of any continent and culture disappears, we lose biological and ecological knowledge that helps us protect our planet. So, in other words, and going back to this campaign and to the children that we work with, we are losing a tool to help children face challenges that are as concerning as climate change. So, I'm going to pass on the word to Marijn now.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So this is why we are launching this campaign to creatively tackle these issues with your help and find a tangible solution to this loss of environmental knowledge and a way to express that knowledge. By writing and sharing stories in multiple languages, we want to build in this way a resource for teachers and children to strengthen their resilience for the future through multilingual stories, but also multicultural stories about forests. And to connect this and to sort of encapsulate this campaign, it started on February the 21st, which is the 25th anniversary of International Mother Language Day, and it will end on March 21st, which is the International Day of Forests and the elimination of racial discrimination. And these stories, these 100 stories that we want to collect, we will in the end publish a selection of these and create a resource, as we said, and we will submit a link to all these collected stories. And to encapture and to encapsulate this campaign, we call it 100 stories, 100 languages, and 100 forests, because every story told is a different story about a different forest, told in a different way, in a different language. So this might be hard to grasp at first, especially when you don't live near a forest. For example, I live in a city, not close at all to a forest, but I live near a park and with lots of trees. So in a sense, it is a small little forest, and I started thinking about that and writing a story about my personal connection to this park. So it really is about your personal connection to whatever woodland, however big or small it might be, nearby.
And we invite you, as you watch this recording, to also think what is a forest to you? So that can probably start triggering one of your stories, and ask it for yourself, for your children, and for those around you. And you'll find that probably there's many different ways of looking at this forest, and those will be shaped by where you are, what your language is precisely, And well, you will see in practice what I spoke about before, biocultural diversity, just happening, talking about, yeah, the different ways we see forests. So that's our aim in the campaign. Just to also now move into how to actually submit the story, let me present to you an example. So this is by Alessia Raineri, sorry. She has allowed us to share this story for our campaign, and she submitted it. And she called it Three Multilingual Siblings in the Forest of Missing Words. You can read on screen how it starts and maybe get inspired, and also see below the original language she gave it in. That was Italian, and the way she submitted it in. So now, after seeing this, and well, sorry, I'm missing one point. The image on the left of the screen, she also made it. So you, of course, don't need to draw, but now you'll see that for the campaign, it's important to provide an image. And this is just a very nice and complete example that you'll be able to read fully after the campaign is finalized on the 21st of March.
Yes, and don't be put off by the fact that she presented this wonderful self-drawn image. When I presented my story, I just found some stuff on the internet, which is also very possible, as we will see, because we now come to the step-by-step guide of how to participate, how to give your forest story to us. And it is important to know that anyone can participate. Indeed, we encourage children to participate, but also parents and teachers and students and any member of your community, really. And it is important to follow these guidelines so that we have a uniform format to review these stories and to publish them and to actually make a resource. So they need to be up to 500 words for narration, or 1 page for a poem. And all stories must include a translation to one of these languages, so English, Dutch, Spanish, Chinese, Catalan, or French. But they can be written in whatever language you desire, whatever language is the language that you want to tell this forest story in. Only you also need to include a translation. And obviously, it has to be about a forest or forests, about a forest experience. So even parks are allowed if the story is about that forest experience. And it could be personal experiences, folk tales, new creations, any narrative frame is valid. And as Sarah has also said, they must include an illustration, either self-made beautifully by the example that we saw before or found on the internet. Just make sure that you may make sure that you can publish that, use these images. And for us, the storage of these documents, it is important to have the file format in this way, to have your name of the story, and then the name of the author, so the name of you, and for the visuals to have the name of the story, name of author, .support, and then the format. And you can submit this via a Google form. This is the easiest way, I would say, to submit your stories. If you want, you can also use Storyweaver. If you want more information on that, you can send an email to the email address as cited here on this page. But easiest is just to fill out the form and submit it through there. Now, for those of you watching who want to collect stories from other people, from, for example, children or other community members, and you're collecting more than 2 or more, so collecting more stories than 1, you can also share a whole folder, so you don't have to go through the Google form 20 times if you have 20 stories to submit. The deadline is March the 21st, which is the concluding day of the month-long campaign. And as mentioned, any information, any questions about information, you can send an email to the email address as presented here on this page. There are some ethical guidelines because these stories are meant to be read to children, and we encourage children to write them themselves, so they should be geared towards children, which means we have a zero tolerance policy for sexism, racism, homophobia or any strong or gratuitous violence in them. So make sure that your story is fit for children of any age. And about intellectual property and privacy, you need to indicate authorship of the story and a source of visual support. So if you're using images from the internet, make sure you reference where you got them from, etc. Because if we want to publish these in the ultimate selection, it is important for us to know these property and privacy things. And if you are the author, you agree to the publication. So if you submit your story, you agree that we, in the end, might select it and publish it as part of the teacher resource, as part of the campaign. And if the story is not your original work, then you must obviously provide appropriate references and obtain necessary permissions to use that story. So if it's a folk story and you got it from a website, make sure to include the sources.
So now we have a section for questions and answers. If anyone in the call wants to ask anything, this is the moment. But also, if you're watching this later on YouTube or on Instagram or on LinkedIn, feel free to leave a comment and we will make sure to also answer your questions there. So I'm just gonna leave a couple seconds, see if someone is raising their hand or just interrupt.
If I could ask a question about how teachers could work with our students to write stories or to join this campaign, how could they do that?
Wonderful. So, Marijn, maybe do you want to go ahead and answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, there are many ways to introduce the topic of forests. You can start by mentioning in class that there is such a thing as International Forest Day and perhaps explain why, and get children to think about their trips to the forest or forest that they live nearby, what animals they might encounter in a forest or what trees they know. Activate their minds to really start thinking about forest, and maybe even, if allowed by the school and by the weather, go out into a green area and talk about it with them. And try and see if there are stories that come up. If they know any stories, encourage them to ask their parents as well and to discuss it with each other. I think the main thing you can do is to really try and activate them and let them think about it themselves.
Thank you, Marijn. And if I just add a comment to complement your answer, as just to bring back a point that we said, if you happen to then have an activity and collect several stories, well, first, this is a multilingual activity. It would be wonderful that in a class, different languages come up when writing these stories, and maybe you can help with the translation. This campaign also allows for the children to have a drawing themselves. So those are kinds of drawings that are certainly allowed for children. And then, yes, just to reiterate, if you collect these stories and scan them or put them into a Word document or whatever format suits you best, don't worry, you wouldn't have to upload these one by one, but when you enter the form that you will find linked below, or later in this call, you'll see the QR code to it. You can have you can insert a link in one of the questions. So there's a question addressed to teachers, and you'll see there that you can just bring, for instance, a Google Doc folder link, and then we can make sure to process each story one by one instead of you having to do all of that extra work. Okay, and thank you very much for your question.
And again, any questions that do arise, should you watch this this video, you can always send an email to the email addresses as listed. Here is a slide that has a bit more comprehensive the information for the instructions, but the instructions can also be found through the QR link that will be presented shortly. But this is a list of all the things that you need to make sure that the document fits these requirements.
Just to say something about the last slide, Marijn, if possible. Recovering a question that had been asked to us before this call about if the stories can be potentially submitted through a video format, for instance. Yes, this is an option. You will also find a section in the Google form where you can upload other kinds of documents, for instance, a comic book, a recording, if the children in your class, if you're a teacher, want to do something else creatively, a performance, a song, anything is possible. It just goes as an additional submission and needs to be accompanied by the original story, the translation, and the image. So that just recovering one of the questions we got asked before this call.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so all submissions need to include a story, written story of maximum 500 words. Okay.
Perfect. And this is for those of you who are still sticking around and are interested in carrying this one step further. We are proposing an activity at the end of the campaign. It's called Forest Walks. And we think it's a great way to take these stories, these languages, these perspectives on forest to the forest itself. And to have this celebration on the International Day of Forest and of the elimination of racial discrimination. We will provide more information on this. Just keep up with our communication channels, whether it's on LinkedIn, Instagram, via email, or on our blog post and our website. And yeah, you'll find out more in the future days on how to participate in this final celebration.
Just as a personal tip for me, if you do go out to the forest, try and see if you can listen to birdsong and try and see if you can spot these birds, because it makes you really silent and really attentive, and then you will start to realize that you are listening to more than only birdsong, more to the sounds of the forest around you, and makes you really feel part of where you are.
Great tip from the bird watcher. Well, this is the end. We hope that this call could answer some of your questions and clarify some of your doubts, as well as give you a bit more insight on why it's important to participate and why we think it matters. So on screen, you can scan this QR code that will take you to the call to action for the Give a Forest Story campaign. And if you have any specific questions, also feel free to email us on the email that is on screen too. So thank you very much for joining, and we hope to read your stories very soon. Okay, maybe we can